You're listening to the Men's Podcast from PursueGOD.org.
Hello, men. Welcome back to the podcast. Pastor John here. And as I was in our last episode, I'm joined by Bron Kahn and Michael Pate. And, we didn't get into their exploits in this last episode. I think of David's mighty men and their exploits, guys going down into a pit and taking on a lion. I mean, that's what these guys do, man, that kind of stuff. They're ultra marathon guys. They run 50 miles up and down the mountains. I think Michael Pate wrestled a bear in Arkansas when he was a kid.
That's true, actually.
Daniel Boone. Yeah, I've heard that's true. So
Star comes from.
So when I say these guys are the kind of men that I look up to, I say that 100% seriously. They're guys who love Jesus, who are looking to honor him with their lives, and they go full circle in their faith. They help the next person pursue God. So anyway, I'm glad you guys could join us again. When we kind of wrapped up, guys, we wrapped up on, what the specific positions were that you took on dating. Did that change as your kids got older? How did you have those conversations? So maybe we'll jump back into that. But then what I also want to do today, guys, is talk about how did you handle the pushback? And how did you really, to use a term that I think you used in the last episode, Michael, or at least I know it was from a book, how did you shepherd their heart versus just trying to make them be obedient? Because we all know that works till they leave the house. If you've got a stern enough hand, you can make them obey while they're under your roof. But then when they leave, they go crazy. At least that's been my experience for people who've been super heavy-handed in their home, but never really talked about the why, right? So maybe, Bron, did you want to add anything to kind of what we ended on in the last episode about the position you took and how you guys communicated that?
Yeah, I would just say, regarding our different kids and how we've approached it, it has varied a little bit. And, we've tried to recognize that I really think if a kid wants to do something, they'll find a way to do it. So, there's only so much control I think we can exercise as parents realistically. And, there are some things that I look back on and I feel like, oh man, could I have tried to step in a little bit more and prevent some things from happening? And I don't know, actually, even in preparation for this, just before I left the house, I was talking with one of our kids who, went through some ups and downs in their high school years and has been open with us about those things and come through it in a good way now. But I was talking to them and saying, like, do you think it would have made a difference if I had tried to force my way in a little bit more to some of the things that were going on in your life? And this child wasn't really sure, actually. So it's hard to say. I think on one level, when we talk about dealing with pushback, I would say the pushback is a beautiful when it's being expressed. And that's something we've tried to encourage our kids with. Like, we want you to talk to us about how you're feeling. And we want this to be something, we're going through this with one of our children right now that's just kind of getting into this age where this is coming on their radar. And so we're actively talking about this and saying, like, we want you to be comfortable coming to us and saying how you're feeling. And if you don't see the situation the same way that we do, we want you to express that and let's talk about it. And I want to get your perspective on what you think is good for you and what you think is healthy. Now, ultimately, there's some level of I'm your dad and it's my responsibility to protect you and do what I think is best for you. And I've actually seen that realization that there is love behind the discipline be impacted, but also trying to help them understand, like, look, this is ultimately your life and you are going to, whether it's now or when you're out of our home and a fully adult, you're going to have to choose what kind of life you want to live. And there are going to be consequences to that, good or bad. So we want to help you understand what that looks like and how to make decisions that we think are going to be really in your best interests. But I would much rather have my kids be pushing back than not have their hearts in agreement and not say anything, because I think that's a much more precarious situation.
Do you mean like hiding it? So they're kind of disobeying, but just hiding it? Or do you mean, no, they are being obedient, but they're like they've checked out on you, or they don't want to engage with you?
Yeah.
Or all the above?
I think it can take both forms, where it's either I will be outwardly obedient, but inwardly I've checked out and I've disengaged and I'm not with what you're talking about. Or I'm going to do my own thing whenever I get the chance to. And so I'm not necessarily going to be outwardly compliant, but I'm not going to engage with you about the reasons why. I'm just going to, again, check out and kind of do my own thing, because that, I think, cuts off that influence that we can have with them. And I think that's a much more potentially dangerous situation versus them coming saying like, look, I don't agree with this. This is why, why are you saying this? And then we can actually talk with them, help them understand and help them see like, look, we're on the same page here. It's not us versus you. We're trying to help you have the best, most fulfilling life you can. And there are realities in this world that we just have to deal with, that not all actions are going to lead to a good outcome.
I know you mentioned in the last episode, Braun, part of your determination and when to start having those conversations just varied by child, when it was on their radar. Did the way you handle pushback also kind of change a little bit with each child, or maybe by gender, or did you feel like it was pretty universal?
I don't know. I'm smiling a little bit because I think we were fairly consistent. I think some of our kids might say like, a different perspective here, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think we tried to be as consistent as we could, and I'll say too, as we were having these conversations with different ones of our kids, oftentimes other kids would be present that were not quite at that stage yet, but they were a part of the conversation. We wanted them to be a part of the conversation. Like, hey, this is how we feel about these things. This is very timely for, this child. Your time will be down the road, but, this is our perspective on this. And different kids have different temperaments. So we for sure have had some of our kids that have pushed back a little bit more on some of these ideas. And then others that have kind of hung back and taken notes and been like, oh, okay, I see some of the mistakes you're making. I'm going to learn from that secondhand and, not make some of those mistakes. So, it's varied a little bit, but we've tried to make it be something that we're all talking about on some level, so that, they understand how we feel about these things and where we're coming from, even before they get to the point where it's more of a timely issue for them.
Yeah, as far as the differences between kids, it's been challenging. There's been some that are very cerebral and want to articulate their position, and we have to they're very smart kids, really kids. And I'm having to think about really hard things at the dinner table, and I'm really fried from work. But the other kids are there watching and listening too. So some of them are very emotional. Their response is emotional, kind of gut reaction kind of a thing. So it takes a little bit more finesse, and thank goodness for their mother, is because I tend to get really frustrated quickly when there's a lot of emotion. So it's like it's a reaction from myself from drama things that have happened in the past with my family. So there's one that's really tenderhearted. So if you raise your voice, it kind of shuts down. So I haven't really had a lot of pushback. We've had a lot of conversations. So similar to Braun's story is that we wanted to make sure that we can have a discussion, not necessarily a discussion where you can try to prove your point, but we want to hear you out, and then we want you to hear us out, but then ultimately the decision rests with me and your mother. And so that's kind of been our approach to any pushback. And so, like, for instance, it might be like they wanted to go to a dance with a group of friends, and so we were talking about when to be back. We're having conversations about what are you going to be doing and what are the activities. And so then we start talking through things, and I'm going to be self-promoting here, but working hard at healthy relationships has been a key to that. And there was going to be conflict, and so let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. I think when you mentioned, Braun, about heart issue, whether or not they would kind of clam up or not talk to you about it anymore, but I think about the parable that Jesus was saying, which is better, the son who says, I'll do it, and then doesn't do it, or the son who says, not going to do it, and then does it. That we really have, when scripture says to wake up, when you talk with your kids, write it on your doorposts, can't stress that enough. It's just about having those healthy conversations, using biblical principles to kind of facilitate conversations with kids. And I think a lot of what that spiritual seed, sowing those spiritual seeds, it's like as they're getting to a point where they're getting more adulthood, they're transitioning. Your role as a parent, I can tell you, my role was you don't get to choose what you eat for dinner. And then there's a point where, what would you like for dinner? And so they're able to make those little mini decisions, and you're giving them trust, building that trust. And so that, I think that helped us a lot by having those mini releases. They get to decide these smaller things, and they get to feel a little bit more autonomy. And that's what we've used as kind of like we've talked about the arrow being sent we're doing mini release so that they get an opportunity to build that trust, to show they have, they understand what our expectations are.
Yeah, that whole principle of trust is earned. We talk about that a lot on this channel for our marriages, but it's also true for our children. We should be giving them opportunity to earn trust, and as they earn it, we should give them a little more freedom. That's kind of what it looks like. I mean, I didn't ask any of my kids what they wanted to eat either until they were a little bit older. You eat what your mom made. I mean, that's just part of it. But as they get older, you give them a little more freedom. Yeah, I think, for us, that was a big part of it was, you want to be careful here. I don't want to throw any of my kids under the bus. We have some of our children who did a better job at earning trust than others. And so we were a little more flexible with some of our kids than others, even as it relates to this topic. And then the other thing that I just tried to communicate to my kids, and I would let them know I didn't do it perfectly, but my boundaries, I'm trying to model them like God's boundaries. They're protective, not restricted. Now, God does it perfectly. All of God's boundaries are perfect. The laws of the Lord are perfect. They revive the soul. They're more precious than honey. Unfortunately, I'm not the perfect dad. So sometimes my boundaries were self-serving. I was lazy or tired. And so I just put some boundaries out that were going to make my life easier. But as my kids got older, I think the one thing I did do well is I did apologize for those times when I had self-serving boundaries. And then in this idea of dating and the restrictions we put on, like, guys, I'm not doing this because I'm being lazy. I'm doing this because I want to protect you. Because I don't want you to deal with adult level emotions like rejection, jealousy, bitterness when you're 14, 15, 16 years old. Like, just be a kid. Go play in the dirt. Go climb a tree. Go do the things that, for those of us who, have gone through all those emotions, if we could be 14 again for a little while and not deal with that, we'd probably take that chance, right?
I would just, say too, again, thinking about like dealing with the pushback or the questioning. One thing that we've tried to do that I think has been helpful, these situations are tough because obviously none of us think totally logically when our emotions are involved, and especially at those ages. So it's like, that's just part of the reality. But we've tried to help them see and think through, if you're really interested in being in a dating relationship at a younger age like this, what is the goal of that? Where is that really going? And is that really out of love for this person, or is it a selfish thing? Because you might have, feelings for this person and attraction to this person, but ultimately, if you're just trying to, have somebody that you can hold hands with or cuddle with, or, even feel that sense of ego boost of somebody likes me, that's not really the same as loving somebody and caring for their needs. Especially even if you feel like, well, this person likes me. I'm giving them the gift of me. None of our kids have said that, to be clear. But, people might feel like, man, this person wants this and I want this. So what's wrong with that? But if you're honest with yourself and if, again, we set aside the emotion and try and be honest and say, like, this is not really going to help this person long term. It's not really in their best interests. It's something that I just want right now because it's in front of my face and, and I'm feeling all these, emotions and desire and things like that. We're trying to help them see you want to approach your relationships, especially by the time you come to marriage, with an understanding that you are in this relationship to serve the other person and to help them and to grow together in Christ. And it's not about you getting your needs met primarily. Because if that becomes the foundation for your relationship at whatever stage, junior high, high school, marriage, it's going to be a rough road. And so those principles are universal. And the foundation that you set for how you look at romantic relationships can start now and can affect you well into your adult life if you're not careful.
Yeah, we can definitely pick up some habits early, but also with some wounds early. I mean, I just think of the average student who has really, had, I guess what you call like a serious relationship, especially if it's gotten physical, if they've crossed God's boundaries and they're bringing a lot of wounds into marriage, and it just makes that marriage that much harder. You're trying to come back from that. So, all right, guys, I've really got three other questions I want us to hit on this episode. The first one is, how involved was your wife in this with you? Like, what did that look like based on the gender of the child? So Michael, you mentioned your wife took the girls off for that Pathway to Purity weekend, which I think is appropriate. It'd been awkward for dad to do that. And my wife didn't join me when I took my two boys, and then I wasn't there. So, but just in general, how did you guys talk about it as a couple before you talked to the kids, right? So that you had kind of a unified front, so to speak.
Yeah. So we would we would typically meet beforehand, typically either early in the morning. That's probably our best time is we would, get into our quiet time and then talk through, some of the things that we've got this, we heard that this was on the calendar. Okay, how are we going to approach this? So my wife has been super supportive, like as far as she's been very, allows me to lead through it. And she's very much a support and helping me keep it on topic and keep it focused and not get too emotional. So she's been very much a steady hand in that. I typically will get fixated on a point and just hammer. That's just my fault. And but she's been able to kind of help me learn how to move past that and make a point, engage one of them, and then allow them to reciprocate that point. She's been super supportive. We met pretty early and we talked through things. We kind of get a game plan, and when we don't do that, it's been pretty rough.
Okay.
You very much can tell when we're engaged. There's like a bunch of. It's like you're getting different messages, and both of us feel like we stumbled really bad on it. And so it's very important that we talk beforehand to do that.
All right. And so you're saying you led most of the conversations with the girls, even though you're the dad, right? You were the spiritual leader, you led through it, but Miranda was supporting, she's keeping you on track. So I'm assuming the girls felt like, I guess maybe we'd have to ask them to know for sure, but you probably didn't kind of get a lot of, well, yeah, but Dad, you don't get what it's like to be a girl, right? Because they knew Miranda was connected with you on this, that you guys had talked through it.
It didn't feel like that. They never really put that out there. They have used our relationship because we had a pretty weird relationship. All our families were really close, and it's not like an Arkansas thing, but we grew up together, and our family.
Boundary number one: don't date your cousin.
Right. But we knew each other since we were like 8 and 7. And so we grew up together, and it was a unique thing. And we were like very clear that that's not like the normal thing, but we'd have conversations sometimes about roles. And one of them came up and it's like, you mean women can't be pastors? And we just had a really long, hard conversations about what it meant and like the scripture that we were using. And man, the emotional one was like, fired.
She was lit up.
She was lit. I mean, redhead and all. I mean, just bad. But she eventually came down and it's been more of like, I didn't lead through the passport to purity thing, but that purity meaning, the whole woman's body kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know nothing about it. I still don't know nothing about it. And been married for like 22 years. So my position is like, it's kind of like I told him that all I want to be is kind of like the rudder on the ship. Allow me to set the direction and then let God fill our sails and send the boat. So a rudder is just a real small part of it, but it makes the direction that controls that ship. So that's kind of how I've approached my role. And Miranda has been very supportive in that.
And so, Bron, where you have both boys and girls, right, who either are in this stage or have been through it, did it look the same for you as far as you kind of took the lead on it and your wife supported you, or do you just share responsibilities? What did that look like?
Yeah, we've pretty much both been involved in most of these conversations. When things are, especially when we feel like we want to set the tone for kind of how we want to approach something. And it's varied a little bit in that, in some ways, Christy's been really helpful for me because I can be a little bit more logical and detached, like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like, there's no benefit. There's a lot of downsides to it. Let's go this direction.
Let's play the numbers.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think there's a lot to debate here. But she's been more helpful in understanding the emotional component of things and what the kids are wrestling through. And in some ways, it's very, again, per child. Like some have been very open with how they're feeling throughout the whole process. Others have been open at different stages. And I think, for some of the kids too, I think in some ways, both girls and boys, I don't think it's a gender thing, but there are some ways in which maybe just because, Christy as a mother is very nurturing, they felt able to be a little bit maybe more open with how they're really feeling about some things with her than they would be directly with me. And so that's been a good thing. And it's something that we talk about all the time. I mean, this is very much like pillow talk for us, like what's going on with the kids. And most of the time, if something comes up where, okay, we feel like we should talk about this, or we're observing this. And so, this is something we need to process through. My reaction most of the time is, hey, let's even if it's like 10:30 at night, like, let's get the kid in here and let's just all talk about it. Instead of just us having this conversation where we're seeing some things and concerned about some things maybe, and they don't maybe get our full perspective on it. I feel like we've tried to err on the side of like, hey, we're going to pull the curtain back here. This is how we see this as parents. This is, what we think is maybe like fine. This is what we think is maybe a little bit concerning, and here's why. So most of those conversations have involved both of us. And for sure, I think there are, again, some ways where we'll have individual conversations, as things come up. And that's happened a bunch too, like both with Christy and myself, with really all of the kids. But I feel like the bigger conversations where if it feels like things are coming to a point of needing to be addressed, it's something we'll all talk about together. And then even now with things as we're dealing with different situations, or, kids want to go hang out in a group context, but maybe there's some, mutual interest within that group. And so we're trying to figure out how to navigate that. Like that's something, if that request, comes to one of us from one of the kids, like we're talking right away before we respond to that, so that we decide together, how do we feel about that and how do we want to approach it?
Just making sure you're on the same page, that you and your wife are unified.
Yeah, one thing that we try to make sure is like we're not like at the end of the day, we're fried from work. We actually give some brain power to it. Like we might sit on it, so it's okay to sit on it for a minute. Or if you're hungry or something like that, just know when your best times to think and talk through things are. Like me, I get kind of really like crazy at, I can't think really straight when it gets late in the day, because just my brain's just been fried from work.
Let's end with this, guys. What would you say to the dad who's listening to this and he's like, it's too late. I haven't had any of these conversations. My kid's 17, 18, they're dating. They've got maybe he knows they're not even honoring God physically. Like how would you encourage him to start? What would you encourage him to do? Would you say, hey, you're going to have to go slower because you haven't laid the foundation, so to speak, right? And if you just go in now and try to make all these changes overnight because now you're feeling convicted, your kid's probably going to push back? Or would you say, no, you got to make those changes anyway? How would you try to encourage the guy who's kind of scratching his head and going, oh man, I should have got on this early?
And one thing we hadn't talked a lot about is how much prayer has been in this. I mean, prayer is, you got to cover this in prayer. Like it's got to be every day. I mean, it's got to be just giving it to the Lord and submitting it to him and leaning into what he has to say to you in his word. So I don't think it's too late. I think our trust is earned, right? So you got to start to build that relationship, start to have those conversations, but do it in a way that you can communicate how much you want the best for them. Like what we've been talking about is like you're looking out for their interests and you just want to help them and support them.
Ron, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would for sure echo the, encouragement towards prayer. And that's something we've seen in our family for sure. But I would say I would encourage somebody in that situation to just have that honest conversation with their child and say, look, I'm realizing some things that I wish I would have done differently over these past years, but I'm coming to you now because I think it's important and I care about you. And, if a child is at that age where they're 17, 18, 19, maybe the amount of change that you can bring about as a parent, is different than when they're 12, 13, 14. But you can at least have that conversation to say, these things are important. And I wish I would have maybe handled some things a little bit differently in the past, but I'm realizing these things now and I'm coming to you because I care. And I want to see you make good decisions, moving forward in your life. And here's some of the things that maybe I wish I would have done differently. Here's some of the things that I see right now that are a little bit concerning. That, you're at a stage where you're becoming an adult and you're going to have to make these decisions for yourself. But I would like to see you wrestle with some of these things because I think that they are important and they're going to have significant consequences for you as you move forward. So I think from wherever you are in this stage of parenting, just approach it from there. And you aren't able to go back and change things, but you can at least communicate how you're feeling now and what you see.
Yeah, and I've experienced just in my relationship with my children that when I do come to them and I'm just honest, like you were saying, Braun, even asking for forgiveness that, hey, I dropped the ball on this. Should have had these conversations earlier, but I want to have them now because I love you. It does help me build trust with them because, I'm not the dad who acts like I don't ever mess up or, I've got it all figured out. So I just would encourage you in that, men, if you do feel like you've dropped the ball, number one, don't let condemnation sneak in. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, there's no condemnation, but let that conviction encourage you to have that conversation. Well, Braun and Michael, I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule. I think this is much more valuable for men to hear you share some insight than just me talking about it. So thank you. Guys, don't forget to take the resources that we've made available for you, have conversations with your kids, have a conversation with your wife, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Find more resources to talk about these topics with your small group, family, or mentor on PursueGOD.org.